Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, faith fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki show. The Nomiki show. The Nomiki show. The Nomiki show. Clash momentarily for class solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, faith fed, everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki show.
We've been talking a lot about how the right wing has been organizing, and I'm old enough to remember seeing how the right wing pivoted from the culture wars that existed during the Reagan era and even during the 90s into different types of culture wars during the 2000s. Of course, there was a big war to rally around. Of course, George W. Bush and Jeb Bush and the Bush family wanted to make sure that the neocons of their party maintained control away from people like Pat Buchanan, who was pushing out a different type of culture war. We're in a time now where it seems as if all of those wars, absolute, like real wars and culture wars, are unifying the Republican Party. But where are we going in the future? And maybe are we there now? One of the most interesting things I find about reading history during times of note is, especially if there's geopolitical stakes. When you look at the war, you look at when the economy fell in 1929, for instance, as Richard Wolff said yesterday on our show. Professor Richard Wolff said, there were hints that the working class was already angry before the economy fell because of the conditions across the country. And he said a lot of the organizing was starting, a decade earlier. And so, when you look back at history and you read firsthand accounts of crazy moments, whether it's the rise of fascists or the Nazi Party or the lead up to World War II, there have been a lot of accounts of folks recognizing that it was about to get very dark, but also recognizing that leadership and people in power were not recognizing it. And I think it's important because, we are attached and tethered to these machines, to our phones, to our computers, to streaming, to games. Everything is sort of gamified in today's world. Even politics is gamified. We live on quarterly financial business models, but also political quarters. The news cycle is a 24-second news cycle. We are addicted to just keeping the information and data flowing. And sometimes what that does is it disconnects where we really are, even though I think intellectually a lot of us understand where we are because we're in the middle of these fights, but really where we are on the ground, materially. And I feel like that's starting to change with working people. Working people are understanding that you can't distract us away from the fact that we don't have rent control, or we don't have an eviction moratorium, or we're not going to get rent relief. Working people can't be distracted away from the fact that their wages have not increased in several decades as inflation, which is artificially induced by employers in many cases. You can't distract away from that with a crazy news cycle. In this movement, especially since Donald Trump was elected, we have been fighting these little battles, whether it's the Women's March or fighting the Muslim ban or the George Floyd protests. We've organized massive movements and micro movements, and we've worked together. We've been on presidential campaigns, congressional campaigns. We've seen wins and losses, but it's been a lot of fighting, a lot of organizing, a lot of educating, keeping us mobilized against an enemy here, an enemy there, an enemy over there. Of course, now you're seeing, and this is wonderful, workers on the ground across this country organizing, unions, quitting, striking. You're seeing them withhold their labor, their power, so that their material benefits, their material conditions improve. And that is wonderful. But while this is going on, I think what we're witnessing is something really bizarre on the right. It's not just about culture wars anymore, although they're still throwing those out there. It's not just about wars anymore, although they're, of course, beating the war drum. There's this other technological aspect of the right wing right now. There's the right wing has found a way to grow its movement because they're always facing demographic shifts. We have a much more diverse country and a much more progressive country. The majority of Americans want climate change, the Green New Deal. They support climate change initiatives. They support Medicare for all. On the progressive issues, majority of Americans across the political spectrum support these policies. So they know that they're not going to win on policy, and they know that this country is becoming more diverse. So they've had to do everything to take over the map of the country, take over the courts. They've invested in every single corner of this country, but they're not holding back on media. We know that they dominate Fox News. We know that they've got their right-wing publications like Breitbart and Newsmax and OAN. But it's still not enough. They still have to keep, as their party dies off, they need to keep people coming in. And this is where it gets bizarre. it's not just that you have some podcast hosts like Joe Rogan, who we'll talk about later on in the show, who have eased into this right-wing populism by dancing with people like Jordan Peterson and Alex Jones. He supposedly claimed he was supporting Bernie Sanders. And I think that when Bernie was running, it was a good idea to broaden the coalition to try to bring people in. My personal concern, is that Joe Rogan was always using that as an opportunity to bring people into his audience and his political experience. That's Joe Rogan. But then you've got folks, one person who he admires greatly is Elon Musk. Of course, Elon Musk doesn't care for labor. He doesn't care for socialists. He's very open about that. He has definitely a supremacist mindset. He wants to explore space at the cost of supporting his own workers and treating them fairly. Space exploration is the most important issue that he thinks we need to face right now, rather than the conditions on the ground in this country, and of course climate change. But he's also investing in neurotechnology. He's obsessed with separating the human from the human, keeping us on this path of being addicted to technology and the next thing, and not rooted in the ground. He's so against materialism, I guess, that he has sold all of his houses around the world. It's like he wants us all to be robots. I'm not really sure what their agenda is, but I think this is something that we have to pay attention to a little bit more closely. Steve Bannon, who we talk a lot about on the show, he's rooted in traditionalism. And if you don't know what traditionalism, we're going to cover it in the future, but go check it out. Go Google it if you have a chance. But it is a white supremacist aspect. It's something that he has not shied away from, but he's been very cautious about how he articulates his belief in traditionalism as a traditionalist. And this overlaps with a lot of the right-wingers around the world who are organizing locally and nationally on a populist message. So how does populism intersect with Elon Musk? Doesn't make any sense. He's not for socialists, he doesn't care about workers, but somehow they're all overlapping. And that is why the technology is so important. Just as today the warmongers are unified with the evangelicals and the low-tax Koch brother types, or no-tax Koch brother types in the Republican Party, there's this other unification of different folks on the right colliding because they know that they need to pull from each other so that they have the future, so that they can essentially recruit, brainwash, and build a pipeline of mostly young white men. Doesn't hurt for them to have a few people of color and women, of course. That helps with their cause, and that's nothing new to the Republican Party. But the goal is to keep young white men angry, and just enough young Latino men angry, and just enough young Black men angry, so that they keep winning power. That is why it's so important to have government oversight of these tech companies, because we know very well that they do much better online than we do. Part of that is by design, and part of that is their ability to understand these spaces in a much deeper way.
Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show.
Brown on before. She's a New York-based reporter for The Intercept. She focuses on environmental justice issues, and right now she has a series out, a brand new series titled Climate and Punishment. It's jarring, frankly. Aline, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So this is obviously a beat that you've been working on for a while, but I'm actually quite shocked that there hasn't been any reporting on, extensive reporting at least, on how the criminal justice system it pushes up against climate. And to see what you've come out with, it seems it's already a rough human rights situation in so many prisons across this country. Add to it how climate is affecting, it seems hard to ignore. So what led you in this direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was exactly what you're talking about. I think increasingly when a big hurricane happens, when a wildfire happens, and it's impacting people who are incarcerated, in the rare cases that people who are incarcerated or advocates connect with the media, you more and more see these fast pieces kind of reacting to these crises. And so I really wanted to find a way to do something that stepped back a little bit and looked more comprehensively about how the climate crisis is impacting detention facilities. I started talking to my colleague, senior research engineer Akil Harris, about potentially doing something with all these data sets, combining these data sets of we have one with 6,500 detention facilities from the Department of Homeland Security. And then there's lots of data sets looking at, flood risk, wildfire risk, storm risk, heat risk. I thought we could find a way to put these things together. So Akil is amazing with data, and he was really the one who created this big interactive map where you can search almost any detention facility in the US and find out what kind of heat risk, wildfire risk, and flood risk it has.
How are you able to even get that data?
It really relied on partnerships with people who have been working with each of these individual areas.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a team of researchers at UCLA led by Nick Shapiro. They're called the Carceral Ecologies Project, and Nick had already been looking at the way this big database of facilities was being impacted by other kinds of environmental issues, like water quality issues. So the Carceral Ecologies folks were really key to figuring out how to work with the prison data. And then, for heat data, we worked with Union of Concerned Scientists, this really great nonprofit that had looked at county by county heat data and how the heat is going to increase in the coming years as the climate crisis deepens. For the flood data, we teamed up with an organization called the First Street Foundation that has property-specific risk ratings, more for residential properties, but we found a way to make it work for these prison campuses. And then finally, the federal government put together a wildfire risk database a couple years ago, and we worked closely with their contractor, Pyrologics. This guy, Joe Scott, is a really great wildfire researcher who helped us figure out how to work with the wildfire data. So, it was really a lot of people involved in making this happen.
So let's start with the heat risk. What kind of things did you discover?
Yeah, so we discovered there people who are incarcerated are already facing really severe issues with heat. We found that about a third of the detention facilities across the US already are located in counties that see more than 50 days a year with heat indexes over 90 degrees, which is enough to make people dealing with a range of health issues quite sick. A lot of these facilities don't have air conditioning. That's something that our data doesn't quite capture, is which facilities have the infrastructure to manage some of these problems and which don't at all. We also found that the number of facilities at that heat level will rise to about 3/4 of the detention facilities currently existing in the US by 2100. Even more worrisome, perhaps, today, no carceral institution is located in a county with more than 50 days a year at 105 degrees, which is a level that the National Weather Service considers dangerous. By 2100, almost 700 facilities will be, mostly in Texas, Florida, Louisiana. So, this is already a really severe problem, and it's about to get much worse.
We're looking at the map right now for our podcast listeners, and I'm just floored by how many prisons there are in this country and jails. I know this isn't even a complete map, and when you see it visually and just how many are in your town. Like if you zoom into Arizona right now, I mean, there's only so many cities in Arizona. You hear about the large prisons, but it's really jarring. And I'm sure that there's many that aren't even on this map. Wow.
Yeah.
So in terms of wildfire risk, wildfires are obviously happening all throughout the year now, we're learning. How does that impact a prison? And what did you learn?
Yeah. So, we focused especially on California in our reporting since California has been so, deeply impacted by wildfires. And I think that's where we're starting to see some people organize around issues of wildfires. And I can talk a little bit about that. But I would also say that one of the most notable things, or one of the most surprising things to me, was the way that the wildfire risk that facilities across the US are facing, particularly Florida. I think Florida had more state facilities facing extreme wildfire risk than California. It doesn't get a lot of attention for this, but the vegetation on top of some of these swampy areas is hot enough to kind of travel across that wet landscape. And actually right now, Florida is facing some pretty significant wildfires that have caused, can't remember if it's a jail or a prison, but a detention facility to evacuate.
Interesting.
Of course, the surrounding
and that's the Panhandle.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, the surrounding community began to evacuate, at least several days before the detention facility was finally evacuated. So I would say that, go ahead.
And when prisoners voice concern, I mean, I know this is in your reporting, what are they met with? I mean, do they have advocates fighting for them on being able to evacuate if there's a fire risk? This is insane.
Yeah, I mean, I think that people's biggest advocates are always family members. It's often loved ones and family members that are connecting to advocates with more access to, policymakers. So via those loved ones advocacy, there has started to be some organizing around getting facilities evacuated when wildfires are in the area. You increasingly see people, I think in California for one of the fires in the last couple of years, people actually showed up to the head of the corrections department's home, kind of demanding evacuations. But, evacuations still tend to be much more rare for detention facilities than for the surrounding communities. And the corrections departments tend to be very sort of hesitant to share information about what their emergency plans are, what their evacuation plans are. A lot of people just don't, without transparency, a lot of people don't believe that they're very robust.
Wow. That's unbelievable. Okay, and in terms of flooding, I can imagine many parts of the country are going to be severely affected by climate change and floods.
Yeah, so we identified more than 600 facilities across the U.S. Facing major to extreme flood risk. We really honed in on one facility in Florida that experienced flooding this past year. That's the Cross City Detention Facility, or it's a state prison. And
where's that?
in
Florida, just for context.
Yep, that's in Florida. It's
no, I mean, and where in Florida? Where in Florida?
Yeah, so it's kind of I don't know if it's quite the Panhandle, but it's sort of in that inner arc along the Gulf Coast. And it's in a quite rural county, Dixie County, that flooded really severely over the summer, but got hardly any national attention. This county, a lot of the county's economy relies on the prison, to function. And so as people's homes were being inundated, the prison was too. One person who was incarcerated said that his cell was flooded with ankle deep water, with human waste floating in the water, and was stuck there for several hours before there was an evacuation. But one thing I think that it is really important to note, especially where it comes to flooding, is that it's not just facilities that we identified as having significant flood risk that are flooding. Cross City does have severe flood risk according to our database. However, we noted a number of facilities with a history of flooding that don't have high flood risk. The issue is not that they're in a flood risky area. It's that the infrastructure itself can't handle, storms and precipitation events.
Oh, that's interesting. So they were never designed to deal with any sort of extreme weather, and now with more extreme weather, it's further pushing it to the limits. Have you been able to document? I know it's sometimes difficult with climate change, but have you been able to document any deaths related to climate change in these facilities, at least over the past few years?
I think that where you see the most deaths is where it comes to extreme heat events.
Right.
It's actually the deaths of incarcerated people in Texas that have forced the state to begin to install air conditioning in more facilities. They're way behind on that. But I would also say that with heat, a lot of times a death that might be associated with heat is not documented as such. You might have an existing health problem that's really exacerbated by being in a place with no air conditioning for an extended period of time, or that's exacerbated by a sudden spike in heat, a sudden heat wave that your body isn't prepared to handle. If you have a heart attack and it happens to be on a hot day, the corrections department isn't necessarily going to document it as it's being heat related.
I'm shocked. Has there been any, since you've been doing this reporting, you mentioned Texas is starting to install air conditioners, but have you seen any other sort of progress? Any organizations speaking out? Anything?
Yeah, so I would say that people are increasingly organizing around this issue. I mentioned California. There's a coalition called CURB that is demanding, they're saying that they don't want California facilities to invest in infrastructure and repairs. Rather, they want 10 facilities closed in the next 5 years. And one of the things that they're focused on is kind of environmental problems, the impact of the wildfires. In some places, generators have failed as the wildfires strike. So this infrastructure issue is a real problem. They don't want the state to pour money into infrastructure. They want facilities shut down. The other place I would note is again, Texas. Family members and loved ones of people who have been impacted by the heat while incarcerated have really started to organize around, or have organized for the past few years around Texas installing air conditioning in its state prisons. It's really a grassroots effort that's led by the loved ones of incarcerated people or formerly incarcerated people.
Jesus. This is really important reporting. Thank you so much, Aline, for bringing this to light and for sharing it. And I hope, as you continue to learn more, please share it with us, because we'd love to get the word out as much as possible. Aline Brown, thank you, as always, for joining us. You can go check out the Climate and Punishment series at The Intercept. Aline is a reporter for The Intercept, and she focuses on environmental justice issues. Go check out her reporting there. It's really in-depth and wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
If you're not already, please make sure to support us on patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. That is how we fund the show. Make sure to like and subscribe. We got to get those likes and subscribes up. We've put a lot of thought and effort on what it means to do this show and to be in solidarity with other hosts and what kind of guests we have on. But we're only able to do that because we have
Unionize labor rights, highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show. The Nomiki Show.
Wednesday. You know that means Benjamin Dixon's joining us. We're talking about how to support communities, allies, how to be good allies. You know the jam. Ben, this is an election year, and it's an election year after redistricting, so a lot of folks are getting a late start and figuring things out. Donations are harder to come by right now. It's hard to raise money online. People are tired, but some people have plans to get folks excited and focused on solutions. And our next two guests are partnering up to help candidates out there focus and have a vision to solve some of our worst problems. We have the one and only Harvey Kaye. He's a professor emeritus at Wisconsin Green Bay, University of Wisconsin Green Bay, emeritus of democracy. I've said this a million times. He's the author of Thomas Paine and the Promise of America, Fight for Four Freedoms, Take Hold of Our History, and FDR and Democracy. And Alan Minsky, who is the one and only executive director of the Progressive Democrats of America. They have this plan. Oh, look at that. That's allyship. I don't have any. I have other people's books around me. I can't even. They're in Spanish. I have the San Juan Star in front of me. Guys, if I'm in a hostage situation today, you know that it's today. Okay? All right. So this economic bill of rights. Los historiadores marxistas británicos. I can't read the rest because I'm too blind. That's Harvey Kaye's book in Spanish. British history of British Marxism. Is that right? Did I get it right?
It's about the British Marxist historians.
Yes.
I was looking for the Japanese copy. I couldn't find it.
David, go showing off. Who's showing off? We're all showing off.
I'm just having a good time because it's great to see you and Ben.
Hey, it's good to see you both, all of you. Yeah.
So, all right, let's just start off with why are you doing this? Why don't we get an economic bill of rights? Why are we going to folks running for office to do so? Alan, this is smart. You've already got a system for us. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the public opinion polling in the United States of America you can take a really long stretch of time, say the past half century, and you're to add up what issues are at the top line and the leading issues of the day, I believe the economy would be lapping everything. Obviously, we have periods where foreign policy is more significant or sometimes a subcomponent in this really of the economy, because let's face it, healthcare in America is both about lack of quality healthcare and also about cost. So that's definitely related to the economy when that does peak up. Close to the economy is a leading issue. But right now, there are three competing, and this season, there are two competing factions within the Democratic Party. It's very explicit and everybody knows it. We have these very clear races between very progressive candidates challenging very conservative incumbents. We even have coming up in Michigan's, on August 2nd in Michigan's 11th district, Andy Levin versus Haley Stevens, two incumbents who are now drawn together, going head to head, one from the right wing of the Democratic Party, one from the left. Following the two successive Sanders campaigns, we clearly have, and everybody in the country knows it, a progressive formation that really stands for something different inside the Democratic Party. But right now in the messaging, especially that enemies of the progressives are putting forward to try to sort of characterize or caricature progressives, the fact that, you look at the work that was done by the squad, by the really solid progressive members of the Progressive Caucus over the past year, right, since we've had the 217th Congress, and over again, the issues they're hitting on are strengthening Build Back Better in terms of its economic components. The economic redistributive, meaning back towards a just economy or a more just economy within the United States, is really the central focus of the work done on Capitol Hill by the Progressive Caucus. Of course, there's climate components, there's certainly racial justice components that are very strong. And we in no way want to distance ourselves from those. We fully, absolutely endorse. They're absolutely essential. But we have to make clear that the economic message is heard. And when you see public opinion right now, we certainly have tremendous economic turbulence in many respects right now, from obviously inflation, but also because of the COVID pandemic. We've had a number of progressive initiatives that have actually been delivered to the people. They've proven very popular. Now we see people backtracking on them. And then we have what's a very, very interesting sort of recalibration sort of in the soul of the country about just the grand relationship we have to our jobs that's going on in the United States of America. And so it really seems like an hour where it'd be beneficial for progressives to lift up and highlight, along with all of the other priorities, not diminishing any of them, but to recognize that the economic argument is a very strong argument, very, very strong argument for the progressives, and it's not right now being heard. And just to finish before we go to Professor Gay, and I've spoken enough because Professor Gay's wisdom supersedes mine for sure. Part of the inspiration for this was, of course, Harvey's work on this over the years, but also a really, I thought, tremendously obnoxious new rule from Bill Maher, where he clearly was defining the progressive left in a caricatured way that just dismissed what is so appealing to people about the progressive movement, completely leaving out the economic component. So this is why we brought this forward now.
It's interesting you say that, and because I immediately think of the New Deal, but there was a reaction by neoliberals, neocons, whoever, the conservative forces, that's Harvey's area, to the New Deal. But simultaneously, you had many people who saw the holes in the New Deal, where, ironically, as much as Bill Maher likes to say, we're all focused on being woke or whatever his deal is, it's actually, that's been missing. And I think what's fascinating about this is it's not, it seems like it's building upon what was presented, so long ago. Am I getting that right, Harvey?
Sorry.
Mm-hmm. No, go ahead. I mean, because many people say, "Oh, the New Deal was racist." I'm going to summarize it pretty blankly.
Yeah, well, the New Deal initiatives were not racist. The New Deal initiatives to get them through the Congress folks were carved out of the New Deal by Southern Democrats, the white supremacist Southern Democrats. But the thing is, so we've had 80 years to mature, right? But the thing to consider is this: the Democratic Party in 1960 actually had a platform that was based upon the Economic Bill of Rights of FDR in 1944. In the same year that the Republicans and Democrats alike began to seriously acknowledge, in light of the struggles taking place, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and others down south realized that it was imperative to bring an end, at least in the South, to apartheid, segregation, white supremacy. And it's interesting to note that the Democratic Party in 1960 had a platform that literally laid out the Economic Bill of Rights and all of the things Democrats would pursue to realize that. And that in the course of the 1960s themselves, you had A. Philip Randolph proposing a freedom budget in 1965 that really was standing on the shoulders of Lyndon Johnson's own call for great society and FDR's Economic Bill of Rights. And he laid out a plan. And as long as we're on video, he laid out a plan that.
What does the plan say for the audio, folks? There's podcasts too. Just tell us what the plan says.
Okay. A
Sorry to
freedom
disrupt.
budget for all Americans, budgeting our resources to achieve freedom from want. The plan was between 1966 and 1975 to spend the kinds of monies, which at the time were estimated at about $20 billion a year, to literally rebuild cities, redevelop the rural areas of America, bring an end to poverty in the United States. And this was endorsed by 150 plus academics, labor leaders, civil rights leaders, foundation leaders, and progressive politicians. And of course, the tragedy was that Lyndon Johnson, who was at that time embracing the idea of a great society, a war on poverty, and also was planning, and they actually did hold it, though it did not take place as it should have. It took place in the White House, a conference to honor A. Philip Randolph. And then in the wake of that is where the war in Vietnam is draining resources. And in 1968, Martin Luther King Jr., who in the early 60s had called for a minority Bill of Rights, now proposed truly embracing the concept of an economic Bill of Rights for all Americans, just that kind of thing, and called for it, I believe, in the pages of Look magazine, and it later also, I believe, was in the Guardian newspaper and is readily available there if anyone wants to look for it. The thing is that, yes, the New Deal was inadequate in a whole variety of ways, and but the point is we have 80 years to learn based on the struggles of the 50s, the 60s, and the struggles we've seen these past several years to address the needs of working people in all their diversity, and to make sure that no one, based on any kind of criteria, would be left out of the rights that all Americans deserve for economic security, for democracy, and for the making of a more prosperous America.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. Good afternoon again. I hear in your voice, Professor K, the fact that we have had enough time to not only solve any problems that may have existed with the previous plans, but we've also had plenty of time to understand the very nature of the problem. Could you just talk about why it would be that why would it be that we have the solution right in front of us, but the powerful would rather go in the opposite direction of exploiting us to our last penny, when we actually could do better if we tried something other than abject exploitation?
Well, so consider the fact that in the 1970s, capital and the right, eventually joined by neoliberal Democrats, essentially, and Alan may or may not subscribe to this particular argument, essentially declared war on working people. Not only working people, but especially on the rights of women, and all the more so in reaction to the Voting Rights Act of the 1960s, a war on the rights of people of color, which actually ended up a war on voting rights that was possibly excluding in many a state students, not only African-American, but white students, the elderly, regardless of their race or ethnicity. I mean, we have seen 45 years of war on the democratic achievements of the 1930s through the 1960s. And it's in those years of the 1970s where this war is declared. And moreover, the leading folks in the Democratic Party, led before Reagan even came there by Jimmy Carter and centrist Democrats, declared war by way of saying we need austerity in America. We have to liberate capital. And the conservatives found this as an opportunity to go after those folks who had benefited the most from the changes of the 1960s. Now, this is the interesting thing. This is why your question is so good. Right through the 1970s and the 1980s, the kinds of things that Roosevelt and the progressive Democrats in the 70s had pursued, most Americans, all the surveys showed, most Americans still wanted, whether it had to do with civil rights or economic security. They wanted it. And so what we're talking about here is not simply the Democrats forgot who they were. There were active Democrats who truly wanted to end the democratic achievements of the 30s through the 60s. And by the way, Jimmy Carter's family was an anti-FDR family, and Jimmy Carter himself had no affection for Franklin Roosevelt. And then the problem on top of that is, while the Democrats are in disarray, progressives and corporate Democrats and the diverse social movements of the 60s were competing with each other in the 70s, capital got it together.
Yeah.
They got it together. I've talked about this many a time I think I've talked about it many a time on your show too, Ben, but I know I've talked about it many a time on Nomiki show. So the fact is that this Economic Bill of Rights, what's fascinating to me is that as Alan and I developed this, we know for a fact that most Americans want this, and they've wanted this since 1944.
Right before this segment, we had Representative Shannon on from Georgia, and we were talking about the repressive laws to go after voters, particularly from Black and brown communities across this country. And she's, Ben's in Georgia right now. And what I find so fascinating, what you just said, is there's an opportunity right now for Biden. I mean, if I'm going to be, if I'm going to play like the centrist game a little bit, he could easily put in one win and say, see, and keep the people divided the way that I truly believe neoliberals have worked for 45 years. Keep them divided. You keep folks thinking that it's not about the economy, it's about fighting with each other. But instead of saying, okay, I do want to pursue expanding voting rights and fixing a lot of these laws, and or go after an economic bill of rights, he's doing nothing. And I feel like that's actually creating a scenario in which people are going to unify around all of these issues and see that the common enemy is the strategy of the last 45 years since Carter. I mean, I'll start with Ben, because you're there. Like, what do you feel? Do you feel like folks are not feeling pitted against each other in the same way they used to?
Well, actually, I feel like
that connection. I was hearing as Professor K was talking about the backlash of some of these policies impacting more than just the intended target. I was thinking about Representative Shannon also with regard to the voting rights being violated and how that is being impacted on more than just communities of color or more than just Democrats in this case. The impact of this generation of unbridled, I don't care, like we could just catch it all, the powerful, right? We could, however we break it down, I think that there is a consensus, Nomiki, and everyone. I think there's a consensus amongst those people who have power, which is not only to divide and conquer, but is such a commitment to an ideology that I think at this point, Nomiki, if I could come back to what you're saying, I feel like they're not even playing their best politics for their own strategy, right? Because they're so committed to some antiquated beliefs about capitalism. It's like they're at a crossroads. Established Democrats don't know how to proceed because the best way to proceed is something along the lines of the Economic Bill of Rights.
So Alan, you run PDA and you work with a lot of candidates, and you have been for many, many years all over the country. When folks sign on, is this like a Medicare for all thing? Oh, yeah, Medicare for all. Many people signed on. Many believe, in Medicare for all and will fight for it. But there were also a lot of folks who signed on because it was popular and helped get them elected. But if it actually came time to vote on Medicare for all, maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they wouldn't support, or maybe if they're running for president, they'd pull away, or some other Senate or something else. How do you see this playing out when folks get elected?
Well, it is the final question on our questionnaire. Look, it's really are we actually proposing to proceed with a constitutional amendment to produce 10 new entries on the U.S. Constitution? That requires 3/4 of state assemblies across the country to pass it. No, we're not proposing that is the thing in front of us. What we are trying to build is we're trying to anchor this economic program as definitional for people who are saying they're running as progressives. Look, I really do think that there are essentially 3 parties inside our 2-party system right now. Now, there's some gray area there. We saw a lot of moderate Democrats vote more progressively on Build Back Better through Biden's lead. We should not have any illusions. This was happening in the crisis around the pandemic, right? They've done the Relief Act, so what can they do to keep the economy boosted during this time of crisis? And clearly the pandemic, going back to the CARES Act, led to a disregard for budget deficits and providing for the general population some welfare that was otherwise way off the table ideologically. So it happened in that context. But it also maybe showed to some of the more moderate Democrats the appeal of some of these progressive politics. I don't doubt for a second that most of them will double back towards being neoliberal Democrats. So we have a battle inside the Democratic Party, and we want to anchor a commitment to these economic policies because neoliberalism has failed the American public, the vast majority of the American public. If you think of politics as what we decide to do with the surplus that our society generates, we basically have a system that we're living in now that designates all of that surplus to the investor class to make them richer. And the rest of us keep going at best at the sort of evil level, just barely keeping our heads above water as we in our work generate the surplus. That's right. lousy social system. In so many ways, there are so many signifiers that we basically have a failing social system in the United States. I mean, we have a mass incarceration system that keeps a steady 2 million people in prison. That's a signifier of a failed social system. The homeless population, the levels of depression, on and on down the line. We need a different social contract, and an anchor for that has to be an economic, essentially, Bill of Rights, an economic agreement, an economic accord, a different social contract. So that's what we're trying to establish and achieve. We know that 60 to 70 members of the House are firmly with this right now. We want to get that up to the majority of House members. And by the way, we know there's sort of progressives in name only inside the Progressive Caucus too. But
with pressure,
Yeah, with pressure, exactly. Right. And in the short term, we're going to have to try to persuade some people who aren't initially on our team to support these policies, hopefully to get to where this is the majority tendency and it takes over the Democratic Party. Because for all sorts of reasons I don't want to get into, and we all can debate about, the petri dish of American politics for political science just shows that we end up with a two-party system as a default within the society. We can analyze why that is to death, but it just seems to be the case. It is consistently the case, and it will almost undoubtedly remain so in the near future. And to achieve the social changes we need and desperately need in our society, not only because of the extant real human rights atrocities that exist within the domestic United States of America, right? But also because of the climate emergency. We need change, and we need change fast. We need the population to buy into our political team that wants to see benign social in our society and in the world. And by the way, democracy is in danger in this country. And you know, oligarchy and democracy are like oil and water. They don't mix. And right now, with the balance of power where it's held in our society, it's going to be a struggle. And that goes to this question that Benjamin raised, which is so deep, about why you have the resistance, the complete resistance of most of the establishment to these changes. It's sometimes soft resistance, sometimes hard. Well, they're benefiting from the current system, and they're probably insecure about how they would continue to benefit in any other system. You know, even if this isn't a direct attack on oligarchs and their wealth, such that it just eliminates it, right? At most, what we have on the table is higher taxation rates, and they'll be disgustingly wealthy at 2/3 of the level that they currently are. You know, it's insane. But we need a new social contract. Go ahead.
And I have to say that I think about this as the only way to save the Democratic Party, which is the only way to save American democratic life, is to enhance it. And progressives who are running right now are not running like from a hole. They're running from a real momentum that we've seen 2015-16, 2020. There is that group known as the Squad. Their numbers have increased. We can increase them now. The point is the Progressive Caucus needs to feel their energy in the heat, especially of the young folks who must make demands on the caucus to make demands on the legislative caucus as a whole inside of the House and indeed also in the Senate. But the main thing is this. When we see
Harvey, 1 second, real quick. I'm sorry if you're not seeing the chat. I just want to give final. Ben has to run, but let's.
Sure.
No, it's okay. I just wanted. If you have final thoughts, Ben, I know you have to chime in.
No, not at all. Nomiki, you're so responsive. I thank you for being such a responsive host. I was give you a few minutes warning, but listen, I really am excited to continue this specific conversation on our show. I know we're setting it up, I believe, for the later on this week. So
Friday morning,
gentlemen,
very early.
Friday morning. I'm excited about it. And Nomiki, is always a pleasure spending time with you.
Super grateful. Thank you so much. Professor, I know you were on a roll, but while you're on that roll, do you mind throwing in what's actually in this Economic Bill of Rights? And
okay, well, the one that's in the original article, we've enhanced. Okay, we've enhanced. So I'll go through them, but since I know we've only got 5-10 minutes at the very most, let me go through them. First, the right to a useful job that pays a living wage, and if I think Alan and I agree that if we could see anything most immediately, we'd want a guaranteed job at a living wage, which would thereby begin to address questions of inequality and also economic security and economic empowerment. Second, the right to a voice in the workplace through a union and collective bargaining. That's a democratic enhancement which would have a tremendous impact on American life. If we think back to the most progressive years in American history, from the 30s through the 60s, it was the years in which not only was there a dynamic civil rights movement, but even in some fashion, more importantly, at the beginning, there was a very dynamic and expansive labor movement. We need labor to be a countervailing power to the power of the oligarchy, the autocracy. The right to comprehensive quality health care. We know, whether it's called Medicare for all or universal health care, Americans have wanted this, as I said before, since 1944. There's nothing radical in that call. 4. Alan, did you want to say something along the way? I saw.
No, except I think you should probably read through quickly because we'll run out of time.
The right to
keep going. Don't worry. I'm the moderator.
Okay.
I'll cut you guys off.
The right to a complete cost-free public education and access to broadband internet. And we are seriously considering how to build in a right to child care for the students who have kids, to put it that way, okay? the right to decent, safe, affordable housing, the right to a clean environment and a healthy planet. We're also going to be working on that a bit more. The right to a meaningful endowment of resources at birth, and possibly free childcare will build into this, and to a secure retirement. The right to sound banking and financial services. The right to an equitable and economically fair justice system. Finally, the right to recreation and participation in civic and democratic life. So during these last couple of weeks since we last saw you, Nomiki, we've been trying to enhance this Bill of Rights in favor of enhancing its appeal.
Absolutely. And Alan, how are people processing this? Is it people are signing up, but how is it being received on the campaign trail when folks are going out there and running?
Well, to be honest with you, Nomiki, one of the things that was very quirky about this is Harvey and I wrote the article. We even held it back a few days thinking that maybe Putin wouldn't invade Ukraine. He did invade Ukraine. And of course, our capacity to have this be as foregrounded as we'd like it to be has been somewhat usurped by everyone's focus being on the geopolitical crisis. But everybody we talked to is just really thrilled about it. Just the other day on the Wisconsin State House floor, a version was introduced there. Harvey's in touch with a few other already elected officials around the country. And then with the congressional candidates, they're all very into it. And again, we'll be in the coming weeks trying to even build up more momentum for it and to look to candidates to foreground this. Now, the candidates we've been working most closely, and this goes a little bit to some of the early questions in this interview. I myself, in working with Harvey, obviously two white guys, I wouldn't be comfortable if we didn't have clear. We really are working in close alliance with two people in particular, Senator Vincent Fort, who's challenging the conservative Democrat David Scott in Georgia's 13th district, and Senator Nina Turner. Nina has, in fact, really embraced this and is really charging forward with it in her race against Chantel Brown. And I also, by the way, want to point out a candidate I haven't spoken to directly about this, but Erica Smith in North Carolina's 1st District. If you go to her webpage, and she is running in a largely rural and significantly Black district in North Carolina, a very poor district. And on her webpage, the quote that is up front is, "We will come together from small towns and farms across our district to win this seat and deliver a new deal for rural North Carolinians." So it's very important that, given the history of the New Deal and the response of the New Deal by many African Americans, that we work in coordination in tandem with leading African American politicians and candidates across the country and lifting this up. And we're also, of course, building upon the work of the academics William Darity and Derek Hamilton, two great Black economists. And the response, again, across the country has been universally positive. And there's a strong recognition with everyone we speak to of the necessity of lifting up the claim made to the general public that if you want a better economic social contract, the progressive Democrats, understood broadly, not just our organization, but, the progressives who are running in the sort of Sanders lineage are the group of people to support if you want a better deal as we go forward, as we emerge out of this pandemic. And don't forget, this has been the largest social disruption any of us have had in our lifetimes within the domestic United States, an opportunity to really redraw and reset our social contract like we probably haven't seen before. We should seize this opportunity. And this is a template that people are embracing to set the table for doing that.
Professor Harvey Hay, final thoughts? We got about 2 minutes.
Well, final thoughts are these, okay? There are two
I'm sorry,
dimensions
breaking news. I'm so sorry to say this. Secretary of State Madeleine Albright just died, was just announced. I'm so sorry to say this in the middle of this. Just have to get that information out there we can just process it. Something like that, we have to kind of interject.
Yeah, I'll also tell you that the Supreme Court of the United States this morning has basically decided that the redistricting plan that had finally been accepted in the state of Wisconsin, the governor's plan, is now thrown out. Okay, so the congressional seats will be sustained, but the legislative seats will now have to be addressed once again. That's another breaking thing. I can tell you that is not good. Okay, every time these kinds of things happen, the Republicans, given the strength they have in the legislature, it's tough. So on that note, I will say, if we want to take back America, it is absolutely essential that the Democrats once again become the party of the Economic Bill of Rights.
Absolutely. I thank you guys so much. I'm sorry for breaking in the middle. It's just we're wrapping the show pretty quickly today with a hard out, so I had to get it in before the end, and otherwise people won't tune into the show because there's breaking news. Well, the department officially stating that Putin is a war criminal. That's beyond Joe Biden's statement. That is an official statement from the State Department now. So
join with George W. Bush and Dick Cheney in that game. So there we go.
Of course, of course. But here we are today. So, all right, Alan Minsky, Professor Harvey K. So grateful to you. Thank you for joining us for Solidarity Wednesday. This crazy show we've had today. It's been a little bit of a whirlwind. Lots of stuff happening. So very grateful to you as always. And we have the link for the Economic Bill of Rights up on the page, so people can go check it out and support your work. And we'll have you back on soon to see where this is going in this insane campaign season that we're in, where people still don't know what their lines are.
Right. Everybody out there, tell your friends about the Nomiki Kunst show. This kind of discourse is what needs to be spread around this country into every household. Tell your friends, families, and coworkers.
I did not pay you to say that, Alan.
No, but I come out of a media background, and this is the level of we want a vibrant democracy in this country. We need this.
Show. It's Solidarity Wednesdays, which means our dear friend Benjamin Dixon is joining us today. Ben is the host of the Benjamin Dixon Show, our ally. Are you outside still again?
I am outside again. With as many kids as I have, 3 kids, it's difficult to find a quiet space these days. So good afternoon. I'm sorry I'm late, Nomiki. Thank you so much.
Fine. You were right on time. You're good. Don't worry. What are you talking about? You're a busy guy. All right. So we love doing Solidarity Wednesdays because it's about building community, about learning from other allies in communities and how we can be better allies, how we can support folks that are doing good work, how we can elevate folks that are doing good work. And sometimes it's how we can take on folks who are trying to divide us and be aware of their tactics.
That's right.
This week, though, we are very honored to have 2 extraordinary women who are running for Congress right now. And I really want to have this conversation with you just because, this is exactly the kind of work I think that we focus on in our lives outside of media. Maybe people don't know that we don't live on the internet the whole time. There was an event just a few days ago in Washington, D.C. for Black women running for Congress. And 2 of the women that attended the event and spoke at the event called Black Women Run are here with us today. One is a candidate for Congress in New Jersey's 10th District, Monty Oakley. And our second candidate is Dr. Stephanie Spalding, who is running in Illinois' 1st District in a very crowded race I know all about now.
Yes.
So, this is maybe Ben, if you want, we can go back and forth just because we got a little bit of a full screen right now. I'm going to do the thing that I always say, which is really important because if you ever read the book about Hillary Clinton's presidency, the one that was shattered, there was this moment in the book right at the beginning where they asked her the day of the election, the press walked up to her and said, "Hillary, why do you want to be president?" And she couldn't answer the question. She literally did, she was all over the place. That is the thing you're supposed to learn or know and be able to say the first thing. So I'm going to ask you, start with Dr. Spalding, why do you want to be in Congress?
Because people that I know and love are suffering. And I know that I have skill set, gifts, and talents that can address this kind of suffering that is happening in my district. And we need folks who care about those who are hurting the most.
Wonderful. All right. Imani Oakley, who's running. Oh, we lost Ben for a second. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Imani Oakley. I'm running for Congress in New Jersey's 10th Congressional District. And I want to be in Congress because I am sick and tired of New Jersey's Tammany Hall machine style of politics, utilizing Black and brown and working class neighborhoods as nothing more than financial and political playgrounds. It is time that our neighborhoods have representation that is really going to fight for them when it comes to fixing issues of the environment, when it comes to housing stability, when it comes to economics, and somebody who is not just going to be there to keep their seat warm. So that's why I'm doing this.
Let's go to Dr. Spalding. Unless, do we have Ben back? No, not yet. We lost Ben for our podcast listeners. Oh, there he is. Got him. Ben, do you have any questions for our lovely candidates here?
Yeah, I had a chance I could hear everything that you all were saying, even though I had to step away from the screen for a moment. I am very fascinated with both of your races. Tell me what you feel distinguishes your race from any of your opponents. I'm not familiar with your opponents, but I'm sure you all are facing some fierce adversaries and competition. What distinguishes, if you don't mind going one at a time?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess I'll go first. Our movement is 100% people powered, 100% grassroots. Before running for office, I was not in a political family. I was not born with a silver spoon inside of my mouth. I was raised by a single mom who was a preschool teacher. I have actually nearly lost my childhood home to foreclosure. In contrast, I'm running against a guy that takes $175K a year in taxpayer money to barely show up to work. He has one of the lowest attendance rates out of any, not just Democrats, but any member of Congress. And he inherited the seat from his dad. And on top of that, he's taking money from some of the worst actors. He's taking money from Raytheon, a weapons manufacturer, several oil pipeline PACs, the realtors PAC that tried to stop Elizabeth Warren and Cori Bush's eviction moratorium during the pandemic. Conversely, I'm taking zero money from corporate PACs, and I was still able to outraise him 2-1, my first ever fundraising quarter as a candidate. So, we are worlds apart, me and my opponent, and that's why I'm confident we're going to beat him on June 7th.
Stephanie.
Fantastic. Oh no, I mean that's what keeps America running, right? Transportation system and infrastructure. But like Imani, our campaign is 100% powered by everyday working people, right? And for people who grew up in the hood like myself, I grew up on the far south side of Chicago in Roseland and West Pullman. We often say, don't speak about it, be about it, right? And the work that is very near and dear to our heart in this campaign and what we are building is something that I have been doing for the last 5 years, right? It's not just I showed up on the scene and fighting for voting rights, or I showed up on the scene wanting to abolish the filibuster. I've been in this fight at the national level, spokesperson for Just Democracy. I've been doing work around truth and conciliation. So I'm an advocate for reparations. And I just look at what's happening in my district, what's happening to people, again, like I know and love, where, we live in food deserts, like amplified food deserts. I don't even know, I guess the Sahara is probably equivalent to the lack of resources that we have and have had over the last 30 years or so. And that in a lot of ways distinguishes my campaign from others in this race who may have been elected before or are standing on their family legacies, but not necessarily doing the work, getting their hands dirty and connecting to people at their doors, connecting with people in a very experiential level. I pull up to the gas station, I'm ready to cry just like everybody else, So I think that that's tremendously a difference that I am of and with working class people.
So I have a question, because you two, both of you have something in common in that, while one is an open seat, that's the seat that Dr. Spalding is running in. Imani, you're running against an incumbent, but there is this legacy issue. I find fascinating that pulls through both of your races. There are juniors running, juniors who have either inherited their seat or who want to essentially inherit the seat. I'll start with Imani. What does it mean? I mean, I think of someone like Cori Bush, who ran against a junior, took her a few times to run before she won, but when she did, oh boy, did she. How does it feel like when you're campaigning against somebody whose name has been in that district for so long, for several generations? Like, when you talk to folks, at the door, older and younger, like what's the reaction about the man that you're running against?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm probably in a unique position, even more unique than Congresswoman Bush, because when I'm going door to door, I'm getting one of two reactions. Either people are saying he's not living up to his father's legacy. So they're like, yeah, it's time for new blood. I haven't seen him around here in years. His dad did so much work for the community, and I have no idea what he does. I haven't seen him since probably he got in. So that's what I'm getting from people who are familiar with him. And actually, half of our district after redistricting is new. And so I've actually talked to people who thought I was the incumbent. And I had to explain to them, like, no, I'm actually a challenger. The incumbent is this person, et cetera, et cetera. And then they look him up and they're like, oh, yeah, you have my vote. So it's a unique position because he has done such little work both in the district and in Congress that either he's not known or the people that do know him are just disappointed in what they're seeing. So, I'm feeling good, even though I'm going against a junior. And sometimes that does give people a boost. But in our situation, it's really, it's not really helping him.
Fascinating.
And Dr. Spalding, how's that play out? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So again, this is a unique situation where a 30-year incumbent decided that they are not going to seek re-election. So it creates an open opportunity for a number of people who perceive that they have been waiting in line, so to speak, or that the seat is owed to them because of their political connections and things of that nature. But I'm also, as you can tell, I'm also a person of faith. I pastored a congregation for 7.5 years. And what I hear at the door is very much a faith-centered response. To whom much is given, much is required. And how you are over a little is how you are over much, right? We have individuals who have been in office, and literally I have constituents who are saying, you didn't do anything as alderman. You didn't do anything as, in the state legislature that has really tremendously shaped and changed our district. Why would I vote for you for this position? And so we're seeing that. And then there are others who are commenting and saying, like, you are the very first person who's ever knocked on my door, to have those conversations one-on-one, who shows up and is concerned about me. And that's how we are building our base. That's how we are building the movement that this campaign is.
Reverend Dr. Spalding.
I know, right?
It's very similar background. I would love to hear you talk more about your, I guess I would have to assume, like, liberation theology and the kind of mindset is the root of what drives you, simply by just looking at the website just now and listening to you speak. Do you listen, or do you find any solace from other liberation theologians that are out there who are doing really great things, like Dr. William Barber? You have Raphael Warnock. You have quite a few people who, instead of this evangelical right-wing faith that is attacking and harming people, we have another side that says, no, we're here to liberate people. Talk about that, if you would.
Absolutely. And again, I spent the last 3 years organizing with a group called Vote Common Good, because they are like, look, these evangelicals, I don't know what Jesus you're talking about, but that is not the Jesus. You are not alone. You are not alone. And we've been having really hard conversations with communities across faith communities across the nation, to really get at the heart of, this is not at all what our faith tradition teaches us, right? And so, yes, I have been with Red Letter Christians. I've been with the Shane Claiborne and the Poor People's Campaign. I have been with Cori Bush is a pastor. People don't remember that Representative Bush is a pastor. So this really motivates a lot of what our mission is driven to, because when we stand for those who are of this tradition, when we stand before God and we talk about how we denied women access to healthcare, how we deny the poor opportunities to eat, but we could fund wars, when we deny people housing, that it's just not going to fly. At the end of the day, we are all accountable for the things that we do and how we steward the resources that we have been gifted to have access to. And I want to stand accountable, and I want to be confident in my level of accountability that I did everything. I left nothing on the field, but I did everything to bring justice and liberty, compassion to every person that I am allowed to touch via whatever platform.
And I can't wait to hear those speeches in Congress, because when Representative Bush gets up and she speaks, it's like,
It's power.
It's literally, yeah, it's
Yes.
incredible. Imani, when you decided to run this cycle, the district looked a little bit different than last time. How have things changed for you?
Well, I mean, it didn't really change as far as really demographics are concerned. I mean, it's still over 80% Democratic. It's still majority Black district, majority minority district. So not much has changed. I mean, there were some towns that were out, but I mean, really, people are so fed up all over New Jersey with the games that the machine plays here. I mean, the messaging really didn't change much. People, when I go door to door, people are still saying like, yeah, just like, Dr. Spalding, same thing. This is the first person that's ever knocked on my door. People are saying that they are upset because their basements are flooding a lot and they want people to do something about climate change. People are saying the cost of education, especially higher education, and people who are concerned as to whether they can afford to send their kids to college. We get a lot of that. So, I mean, really, the messaging, it doesn't really change. The problems don't really change. There are some lines that have changed, but ultimately, I mean, people are sick and tired of New Jersey's machine. They're sick and tired of having somebody who is not working for them and really delivering the real everyday things that they need. So, I mean, technically the lines changed, but not much really changed for us with that.
Good. So you took part in this event called Black Women Run, and it was in DC. And I love that there's solidarity, because a little known fact, I don't think people know this, but candidates aren't always helping each other out. And I think that's what's really beautiful about this and the movement of having progressives running across the country on similar platforms is you boost each other, you help each other, you grow. Rising tide lifts all ships, but it's like being an ally. So I'll go to Dr. Spalding first. What was that event like? And who else was part of it? We have some of the video right now.
Absolutely.
I think we lost her for a second. Did she freeze? All right. Well, then, Imani, we're going to go to you first.
Yeah, so it was my first time meeting pretty much all the other candidates there, but I really, really, really loved the solidarity. And it's so interesting how we were from all across the country, right? Like New Jersey, Ohio, Illinois, Maryland, Florida. But the kind of the things that you experience as a Black woman running for office are still consistent no matter where you are in the country. Difficulty with people trying to paint us as angry, difficulty with people trying to paint us as unqualified, even though we're some of the most qualified people to run for office, people trying to just paint us in these different, very nasty ways that they use uniquely with Black women. And so being in a room of all these Black women who are overcoming that, getting past that, and really, really doing well and doing something positive was a great experience. I had a great time.
Now, Dr. Spalding, Dr. Reverend Spalding or Reverend Dr. Spalding? Which one goes first?
Either way, it doesn't really matter. Stephanie is really good for me. But for that, I just want to say, when we talk about infrastructure, broadband access for a lot of communities is an issue. It's a concern. So you all just experienced that. But I was just, saying that for me, it was such a powerful experience to have this panel of women to run together, and shout out to Isra Allison, who's, it was her brainchild. One of the things that people don't know, yes, we talk about progressives and trying to get progressives in office. We talk about getting women in office and progressive women in office, but Black women are the least funded candidates across the country at every level. So to be a part of an event like this, where we are not, sharing resources, but really accomplices to each other as we are running, is such a powerful moment in history. And I just appreciate the work that each of these women are doing in their own districts, but also what we will bring to Congress when we win, and when we win together.
Imani, as I was listening to Stephanie talk about the difficulties that Black women face in common, particularly around fundraising, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that, as well as if you are facing anything, either of you really are facing any of the type of pushback from the establishment that other progressive candidates, other Black women candidates like Cori Bush, like Nina Turner have faced. Imani, and then Stephanie.
Oh yeah, I mean, raising money is definitely difficult for a number of reasons. I mean, there's the inherent racism with regards to people they want to give to and buy, but there's also the fact that, a lot of, and maybe not, let me not speak for Dr. Spalding, but personally, a lot of my network are Black professionals. And even Black professionals, because of the way wealth has been created or not created in this country, that professional money goes to your aunt, goes to your mom, goes to your kids. It spreads all over. So I'm probably last on their priority list, which you gotta take care of your family. And so that makes it difficult. Then you have on top of that false bias about whether they actually want to give Black women or not, if they're not in that situation. So it is very difficult. Again, we have been able to overcome that. We've raised over 470K so far, and I'm really, really thankful for that. Again, all grassroots dollars. Our average donation is $33. So, we've done really well with that. But the nastiness is definitely coming. I mean, I've been called by pain supporters vagabond, which, some people don't really know what that word really entails. But if you've grown up around Caribbean people, being called a vagabond is that's a very nasty word. It's like somebody who's dirty and low down and nasty and disgusting. They've been trying to paint me as too ambitious, which is ironic because, I'm running against a guy that doesn't show up to work, and they're like, you want to show up to work too much. So I don't know. But the games are there, and it's very particular against Black women. But of course, we've always overcome that, and I'm confident that myself, Dr. Spalding, and all the other women on that panel are going to overcome it this cycle also.
And similarly, I agree in a lot of ways. The way that Black wealth or wealth just in this this country has been designed, Black women are always the last on a lot of these lists, and so that expendable income is not present for us, even though ironically, we are often the highest educated and qualified. Look at the ways that we are examining Judge Ketanji Brown, right? So we get challenged on the ability to raise money because most of these organizations, and even progressive organizations, sorry to say, it takes money to raise money. They want to know that you already have access to almost $100,000 in your own personal network before even progressive organizations will start to see you as a viable candidate. So that's on the fundraising side, but also to the credentialing side. I have people who are questioning my ordination, who question whether or not I am aiming again too high. And I'm like, I have a whole PhD, what? And was tenured and left my job as the chief diversity officer for my university. A lot of things that in terms of bias are just levied against Black women. But what we do enjoy, what we see that people enjoy, they love our passion. They love it when we get in the spirit and our heads start to roll and our fingers begin to snap and we are giving the fire in terms of speaking to the issues and the concerns. They love that we are the most consistent voting bloc in the Democratic Party. But again, they do not invest in us as candidates.
100%. Well, okay. Yes. Speaking of your candidacies, where we're going to put your information up. So don't worry about that. We'll have your websites up there on both the podcast and on the YouTube and Twitch channels. But election dates, and this includes early voting. So make sure to mention to folks that date, because that's really important. So we'll go to Imani first. When's your primary date?
Yeah, so primary day is June 7th. VBMs are going to drop, though, April 24th. So if you are signed up for VBMs, or if you just want to vote by mail anyway, there's still time, I believe, for you to sign up. April 24th is the day. And I want to also make sure, because New Jersey has something unique called a ballot line. We have the most corrupt ballot design in the country, where machine favorites are put in one long column and progressive challenges are placed somewhere random on the ballot. So when you get your ballot, whether you're going to go in person or whether you are doing VBM, you're going to have to look for my name and then click it. So don't go down that line. Look for my name, Imani Oakley, and then click it. So that's April 24th, VBMs, and then that is June 7th is the election day.
Dr. Spalding, when's your election?
And so our early voting and vote by mail begins June 7th, and our actual primary is June 28th. So we want Illinoisans to be prepared to look for our name. And I tell people, look, if you can remember the flower or the basketball, then you got me, right? It's either the Rose or the Spalding, right? Then you can remember me. I will probably have the longest name on the ballot, both initials, first name, last name being the same. So yeah, we are encouraging people to vote early. Unfortunately, in a lot of districts, like across the country, there is a drop off during the midterm election cycle. So we really are encouraging people to come out and participate in this midterm.
Ben, do you got any questions before we?
I do. I the most important question of all: when can I get both of you on my morning show? Because I think everybody needs to hear about both of your campaigns.
I am.
You don't have to answer now. Look at
it. Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. Listen, just send that email and I'm there.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Love it. If you can give money or volunteer or both, go to their websites. If you're in the Chicago area, if you're in the New Jersey area or tri-state area, or if you want to go and help. I mean, I know people who are dedicated, who get on the road and go support candidates across the country.
Or you can do it from your home, wherever you are. I think we all have virtual phone banks. So wherever you are, you can volunteer.
Wonderful. Well, virtual phone banks, obviously dollars help a lot because it pays for those signs up there. It helps pay for pizzas when people go knock on doors. It pays canvassers. This is super important stuff. You have to have a viable campaign to be successful. You don't have to have millions of dollars, but we need to invest in more progressive working class women and especially Black women because, as we know, the statistics are shocking. Stephanie Rose Spalding, Imani Oakley, thank you so much for joining. And Benjamin Dixon, as always.
Pleasure.
Love Wednesdays.
Nomiki.
Love Wednesdays.
The pleasure's always mine.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Are you joining us on all the podcast platforms? If you want to go even further, we have a very special podcast that we release on Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/The Nomiki Show. There's all different levels, as you know. And when you support us on Patreon, it helps us put together the other stuff. It helps us have a show. We have all different types of levels. And of course, you can get swag. You can go to patreon.com/The Nomiki is, of course, the host of the Antifada and Everybody Loves Communism podcast. Jamie, what's up? How you doing?
You know, I'm better than I have been in a minute.
That's a good thing, a good measure.
I'm still a little bit sick, but yeah, I just had a string of really bad luck in Mexico where I got COVID and then I got a stomach infection. And apparently, according to my doctor, the stomach infection probably made me less able to get all the way better from the COVID. So I still feel kind of crappy, but I am on the mend and I'm alive, which is the most important thing.
The only times I've ever had stomach infections, like real ones, like the kinds where like the worming is in you, is in Mexico. 2 times. One, I shared some food with somebody. That person ended up in the hospital for 3 weeks. In major, like really, really, really bad. For me, it was just like I didn't understand how sick I was for 3 weeks. So, but they were like much. They ate more of what we ate at the shared table in Tulum. So, I don't know what you did, but you know, obviously, don't drink the water and be careful with the seafood. And people, it's just because we have different systems. Like our stomachs are used to our water here. It's not like one's worse than the other. They all suck.
People don't drink Mexico City residents don't drink the water either because it makes them sick too. But sometimes some of it sneaks in there somehow. I don't know.
Something.
Yeah.
you know
Let's
what they
stop
need to do? They
thinking
need to
about
put
it.
chlorine in their water like they do with us. We're just glowing. You think this is a purple background? It's not. It's just me. All right, guys. So where do we want to start here? Oh, there's so many things. What's a good little
Oh
ease
boy.
in?
I
Okay.
have not been following the news, I must admit, because
worry.
I've been buried very deep in 100-year-old text by Lenin, which is the thing I recorded on this week. And before that, I was just like on the bathroom floor in a Mexico City Airbnb. So let's hopefully.
All right, we'll
do
start with
all
the easy
right.
stuff. I think you'll be able to do well. Let's start with Santa Claus. How about that? Santa Claus is running for Congress. Santa Claus is a member of he's a Democratic Socialist, I guess. I didn't know this. I thought he was a capitalist, frankly, because he was forcing all the well, no, he gives it for free. So word is that Sarah Palin's running for Congress in Alaska, and there is
Oh my
a
God.
guy named Santa Claus.
That's so
on
funny.
I know, I just can't. I saw it and I was like, this is too much fun. Let's put that up on screen.
Tonight's Fact or Fiction, we're looking into a nugget that has people doing a double take. Sarah Palin got a lot of media attention last week when she announced her candidacy for Alaska's congressional seat. She joins a field of 50 other candidates, which includes Santa Claus. And that's no joke. Santa Claus, which is his legal name, is a two-term councilman and current mayor pro tem of the city of North Pole, Alaska. He describes himself as a democratic socialist in the mold of Bernie Sanders. Before changing his name from Thomas O'Connor, Claus held a number of jobs, including special assistant to the deputy police commissioner of New York.
What?
Wait.
What?
That last
Hang
part
on.
is weird.
Let's Google that one. Let's. I was like really into him until he was the deputy assistant. Okay, I'm Googling him.
I had to throw that one in there. It's like a real milkshake duck situation, you know. We regret to inform you that Santa Claus is a cop.
It's a cop. Thomas O'Connor. But this is okay, so this is interesting. I mean, obviously he's Santa Claus and he is an elected official, so that's interesting. He's got some experience in North Pole. What?
You know, I'm really looking forward to Sarah Palin having to run against him, but still walk the line of not wanting to tell children that Santa Claus isn't real. She's just going to have to, she's going to be like, oh, Mr. Claus, don't you know we should give no one health care and kill the gays?
No free goodies for you. Everybody wants free things. Oh my God. Maybe Santa Claus is who we needed this whole time. We just needed to burst everybody's bubble and force them into saying things like, no, free things are good. Maybe that's it.
Yeah. I mean, I think Bernie boiled that message down pretty well, but you know, maybe Santa Claus can boil it down even further. Maybe maybe he's the messenger that this country really needs.
But I am a little concerned that Thomas, previous Santa Claus, like before he was Santa Claus, before he transitioned to Santa Claus, I don't know what he was Thomas O'Connor, deputy commissioner of the NYPD. I'm like, is he really a Bernie supporter? Is he really DSA? Did something happen? Did he evolve? Or is he pulling a Joe Rogan? Because I do want to get to Joe Rogan too. Joe Rogan, who was a Bernie supporter, but also maybe a Nazi. I don't know. I'm starting to feel a little
most tepid Bernie supporter of all time, by the way.
That's a very respectful way of saying it.
Yeah.
Okay, like he is now having a hissy fit because it gets him attention, in my opinion, that he will quit Spotify if he has to walk on eggshells. Oh my God, this
Oh no.
So entitled. I don't know if you can hear that.
Wow.
How about, instead of cancellation, how about shadow banning him? That would be fun. Love to see all the platforms do that and see how he really feels. Or is that beyond his vocabulary? Seriously. All right. I just had to throw that in there because I can't stand him. So speaking of Nazi-aligned people, Peter Thiel is having a meltdown because like when billionaires fight, I It's fascinating. I love seeing the dynamics. First off, what does Peter Thiel represent to you, Jamie? Because I don't think people know enough about him. I know you do.
Yeah. I mean, what is he? He is the world's most boring vampire. He was a big investor in PayPal. That's how he made all his money. And wait, was he invested in Facebook too? I forget. But the thing that he's really known for in my circles is his company Palantir, which sells military technology to ICE that they basically use to surveil and terrorize immigrants at the border.
Well
and
said.
There's all kinds of uses for that too, but that's like the best known use of it. It's also probably being used to surveil US citizens as we speak. It's being used for all kinds of evil shit that they don't have to tell us about.
Right. And he's a big specifically Bitcoin supporter. And he's having a meltdown right now, Peter Thiel, because he thinks that Jamie Dimon, Larry Fink, and Warren Buffett, the finance gerontocracy, are preventing Bitcoin from reaching $100,000.
Oh, wow.
And he called Warren Buffett a sociopathic grandpa. Let's roll this clip because this is just like,
yeah.
I mean, it's juicy, but it freaks me out a lot.
Give it to me.
What exactly is Peter Thiel saying, and what is the bigger picture around his comments? Is he just long Bitcoin and talking his book?
Hey, Manus. Well, he's a provocative guy. He often makes provocative comments. So in a way, this is no surprise, but he is definitely playing to the crowd at this Bitcoin conference, right? They want to hear about how great Bitcoin is. They get very excited about it. This has been the case, at that conference for multiple years. So him saying, we could have this great thing going on that works. I mean, Thiel is kind of funny. He's saying there's this financial gerontocracy with a 66-year-old involved. Thiel is 54. So he's not that much younger than the people he's talking about. But one other interesting aspect, of course, is that Thiel is helping Trump-affiliated candidates in the U.S. midterm elections. You had Warren Buffett, who endorsed Hillary Clinton in 2016. You have Dimon and Fink, who were critical of the people who went into the House on January 6th in the U.S. with those protests. So it may also be people that he, kind of sees as problematic, and he may want to set up this narrative for more reasons. So that's one thing to be looking at as well. That
oh my God, so, okay, this woman is like really talk about walking on eggshells. She's like, those people who went into the Capitol, visited the Capitol, might be aligned with them. Oh my God. So Peter Thiel, what's so interesting when you look into him is he started doing this. His political philosophy was in college. Like he was hardcore libertarian, extreme conservative. He was involved in organizing and writings. I mean, you can really go back and find the roots of his political philosophy. Except against gay people because he is gay, and that's his, maybe that's why he's libertarian and not like a fundamentalist or something. But she
he's buddies with Trump.
A little bit.
He's friends with those people.
Yeah, and a lot of the like cryptocurrency inner circle, the Brock Pierces and the former John McAfee's before he died. They were all very close to Trump. They were on his inaugural committee. And I don't know. I mean, there's more to this like cryptocurrency craze that I think folks aren't really understanding, and that it does have roots in like crypto fascist communities.
Yeah. So I think the reason why all of these libertarians are so obsessed with cryptocurrency is because one thing that we still need the state to do is what gives value to money. And if you are a capitalist, and all of these people are, because libertarianism is just private tyranny on the part of capitalists, then that concerns you, right? So if you can kind of get around the need for the immense power of, say, the American war machine to back the value of your money, and the fact that they collect taxes in that currency, et cetera, then you've gone a decent way towards achieving your goals of, making the state sort of defunct. So I think that's why they're also obsessed with it. I don't think it's going to work, and it makes me laugh whenever I see it take a dive or something else embarrassing happens. You can't really blame that on Warren Buffett, I don't think, although maybe he did something I don't know about. It's gambling. And like there are lots of tests of is this money or not? One of which is can you pay your taxes in it? Can you go to the bodega and use Bitcoin to buy a banana? Maybe in San Francisco, but still in most places, the answer is no. So I'm really not afraid of it. And I think it's funny.
I mean, they have lobbyists all over the country. I mean, Eric Adams has talked about, paying the budget in crypto. Eric Adams, do you want to hand over New York City to what was just released as, 80% of crypto is one Russian oligarch's money floating around, and not to mention the cartel money, not to mention what Chinese, who knows who has interests, in the world powers community, like in destabilizing the US dollar.
If the Russian invasion of Ukraine saves us from putting all of New York's budget into funny money, that will be a silver lining.
I don't know if it will, though. I think it's like part of their warfare. It's like first it's Ukraine, then there's economic warfare. I truthfully, like, I do think that this is a big part of it that folks aren't really getting is, there are a lot of folks I know even watch our show that are into crypto, and I understand like the excitement of it. I've been personally
gambling rules.
Gambling is fun, but it's it's in some ways transparent, but it's also not transparent when you're moving money through different coins and then buying houses with those coins. And instead of like an oligarch just like straight up buying a house and laundering their money through that, they're laundering it through many different economies, and they're all speculative. And so what happens when that bursts? It's much more seismic than just a housing market burst. It's much more seismic than, a currency deflating. It has deep economic consequences globally. And I don't think like folks who are going to these like sexy Bitcoin conferences with like Beyonce or, Serena Williams are really getting it. It's fun. Yeah, it's cool to show up at these parties. But you know what else was really fun? Like going to tech parties 10 years ago. And how'd that go?
I mean, I don't think that any of those parties have ever been fun, but to each their own. I mean,
you mean that naked sushi models weren't your thing? Really?
Yeah. I mean, look, I might have worked at a few of those parties, so maybe that gave me a bad impression of them. But no, what was I going to say? I mean, this seems like yet more evidence. Like we saw this with the 2008 financial crisis, right? The global capitalist economy has progressed past the point when it was profitable to invest in making things. Investors are running out of places to go. That's why they invest in increasingly silly apps whose value is purely fictitious. And we have an economy that is increasingly based on fictitious projections of future capital, increasingly built on sand. So, you can't be surprised when it goes to something like Bitcoin. And you also can't be surprised when that causes everything to implode.
It reminds me of that one app. Remember the Yo app? Remember how it like raised, I can't remember how much money. It raised like some stupid amount of money. This is maybe 10 years ago. And it was just at the height of all this. It was like, the Yo app has raised this much money. Well, what does the Yo app do? Literally all you do is say yo to each other.
Didn't it somehow get infiltrated by Nazis?
It seems like their jam. All right. I want to just, great segue. Remember that time, Howard Schultz compared the former CEO of Starbucks, Howard Schultz, compared the union organizers in Buffalo to Jews riding a train into concentration camps. Remember that? Speaking of Nazis? Yeah, that was Howard Schultz.
Sorry, my podcast is bothering me and I was not listening. Can you repeat the question?
Oh, God. Speaking of Nazis,
sorry, that was a very good setup.
Actually, we should keep that in. Speaking of Nazis, remember that time former Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz compared the plight of the workers that were organizing at Starbucks to Jews on trains going to the concentration camps. Do you remember that? That was a great analogy. Great analogy. Well, he's back. He is back. They say that he saved Starbucks back in 2008. And maybe he can again if unions don't get in the way. Let's play that clip.
Springer, thank you to Jonathan Honig on this. Jonathan, you know what's interesting about both the Amazon and Starbucks case is their workers were paid handsomely. Now, not that that should be your only draw, but between benefits and hourly wages at or around or even above $20 an hour, it does beg the question, how is this gaining so much steam?
Well, I think there's a political movement, as Dan pointed out. There's a political momentum towards organized labor. But it's sad, Neil. It's not just frustrating. It's sad because nothing's been better for the workers than people like Howard Schultz from Starbucks. You know, Starbucks has pioneered so many benefits for their employees, basically transformed what used to be considered Mick jobs. I mean, he's the Ray Kroc of our era, Neil, transformed the culture, created all that wealth. And I'm bullish on Starbucks, not just because they've cut the buybacks, but I'm bullish on Starbucks. You know, Howard Schultz saved this company back in 2008. He can do it again as long as the unions don't get in the way.
But he's cooled it on the stock buybacks for the time being to focus on those workers. At least that was part of the announcement. So clearly what was going on at his shop, as well as Amazon, telegraphed what would be happening now, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's, you know, the criticism of buybacks, Neil, is always that, you know, there's no benefit. It's just financial engineering. But, you know, Howard Schultz is cutting the buybacks because he wants to, reinvest in the company. And that's the whole point. A company like Starbucks, I mean, their success isn't guaranteed, Neil. And right now they're going to have to invest in the whole.
So we just have a couple minutes, but my takeaway is, so they're saying, Jonathan Honig is basically saying that it is good to pay workers higher. Like, isn't that a great thing that he's doing? So, okay, great. If that's the case, then why doesn't everybody do that? But obviously there's more to this. Jamie.
Okay. First of all, $20 an hour, and he's including non-money things in that, like benefits that it's not necessarily that every worker has. That's not a living wage in a lot of places. What is it in New York? It would be like $33 an hour or something.
Exactly.
That should be the minimum wage. If it was a living wage, I saw you tweeting about that a while back. So like, don't act like you're doing them a huge favor by paying them like probably $15 an hour, maybe, for work that's, you know, pretty taxing on your body. I've been a barista. And it's not the easiest thing. You know, you might call it low skilled, but you have to stand up all day. Your knees hurt. You have to deal with people and the rush and the stress. And then sometimes you have to clean out the milk jugs, even though you're a vegan, and that's super, super gross. Not speaking from personal experience or anything. But where was I
people
going
before
with
they've
this?
had their coffee? Like, my God, that's the last thing I wanted. One time I went to I was at the airport before like 6 a.m. and it hit me like everybody was getting in fights in the line. I was like, oh my God, it's because it's so early in the morning. Nobody's had coffee. I feel so bad for everybody who has to do any sort of morning shifts. It's the worst.
Yeah. And, you know, getting up early kind of sucks too for most people. But where was I going with this? Yeah, I mean, he's just doing the capitalist thing where he's like, "Oh, you should be grateful. Don't you trust me to take care of you?" And it's interesting because there are capitalists who at least pretend like they think unions are a good thing. You know, like say the entire Democratic Party, right? Joe Biden at least understands that he has to pay lip service to organized labor and sort of bring him in as this junior partner in capitalist development, which is something that only happened after workers fought and in many cases died to get unions in the first place. And then, you know, the Democratic Party was like, all right, you know, we got to give you guys a seat at the table and bring you in so that you don't cause even more trouble for profit. And then that's basically what's happened to organized labor. But it's very, very cool.
Lib, man. Stop talking about the Democratic Party. Don't you know? Just like stay on the sidelines, don't do anything, and complain on podcasts and yell at people for not doing it right. That's what you're supposed to do. Okay, Jamie, you're not
I
actually.
mean, I do that too. Don't worry. That is among the many things I do. But yeah, I'm so excited to see this massive wave of unionization across Starbucks. It's moving so quickly,
so fast.
Very, very cool. Very impressive.
Well, the model is, Michelle Eisen from Buffalo said it very well. She's like, the model is great because you have small Starbucks. There aren't a lot of workers there. It's a younger workforce, majority, at least like the new, and it's, so they're more accustomed to like these conversations. And it's just like more scalable in that sense. So I definitely admire them. And of course, once again, to Chris Smalls, and all of the Amazon workers who've been organizing in Staten Island. Incredible work. Jamie, I love you. You're the best. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Friday.
The Nomiki Show. Clash momentarily for clash solidarity. Cash circulating, give the masses back its currency. Greed from elites, oligarchs stay fed. Deep state, faith fed. Everybody break bread. Racism, homophobia, sexism, religion in this melting pot we live in. Time to build a new system, unionize labor rights. Highlight the issue, talking heads left is best. The saga continues. The Nomiki Show.